Welcome back, dear friends, to another exciting episode of the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. We are on part 24, part 2, covering paragraphs 102 through 110. And without any further ado, dear friends, we'll have our opening prayer. Thank you so much.
You're on mute, Yuda.
O thou merciful God, O thou who art mighty and powerful, O thou most kind Father, these servants have gathered together, turning to thee, supplicating thy threshold, desiring thine endless bounties from thy great assurance. They have no purpose save thy good pleasure. They have no intention save service to the world of humanity. O God, make this assemblage radiant, make their hearts merciful, confer the bounties of the Holy Spirit, endow them with a power from heaven, bless them with heavenly minds, increase their sincerity, that with all humility and contrition they may turn to thy kingdom and be occupied with service to the world of humanity. May each one become a radiant candle. May each one become a brilliant star. May each one become beautiful in color and redolent of fragrance in the kingdom of God. O kind Father, confer thy blessings. Consider not our shortcomings. Shelter us under thy protection. Remember not our sins. Heal us with thy mercy. We are weak, thou art mighty. We are poor, thou art rich. We are sick, thou art the physician. We are needy, thou art most generous. O God, endow us with thy providence. Thou art the powerful, thou art the giver, thou art the beneficent.
Awesome, Ms. Yuda. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, dear friends, welcome back. We are studying the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, and the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah is the 6th letter of the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi, and it's found in the World Order of Baha'u'llah's selected letters. So if you don't have a copy of the World Order of Baha'u'llah selected letters, get one, okay? Then you can find the letter, okay? It's called the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah. Tonight we are continuing our study, okay? And we are, this is on page, paragraph 102 through 110, okay? And paragraph 102 starts on, at least in mine, it starts on page 147 at the bottom. It says, an attempt, I feel, should at the present juncture be made to explain the character and functions of the twin pillars. I love the beloved guardian. He always uses such humbleness, humility in his words. An attempt. Who else better to do it, right? An attempt. Come on, an attempt. I mean, so this is the beloved guardian speaking. An attempt I should at the present juncture be made to explain the character of these twin pillars, namely the guardianship and universality of justice. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's study these because we read it last time, and I encourage you, as always, to reread these paragraphs for yourself, because we cannot reread every single one of these paragraphs. It will just take an inordinate amount of time. But this session, we're starting to go into the meat of breaking it down, okay? That's what we're going to do tonight. Okay, let's get into it. So paragraph 102 through 110. In this section of this letter, right? It's not a book. Remember, it's just a letter. It's quite heavy. So in section of this letter, the beloved guardian is elaborating on the striking features, as well as the structure, the character, as well as the relationship between these twin institutions, namely the guardianship, as well as the universal house of justice, as the twin pillars of the Baha'i administrative structure. Okay, so this is in these paragraphs 102 through 110. Okay, these are twin institutions. They are divine in origin. They are essential in their functions and complementary in their aim and purpose. And without the institution of the guardianship, the world order of Baha'u'llah would have been mutilated. Where have we heard this complementary term so much before? This is asking my class. We've heard this. It's the complementary. Where we talked about it in a prior section, that there's two other institutions that are complementary. Can anyone think of where we heard that so much before? It was in regards to the will and testament of Abdul Baha and the Kitab Aqdas, right? The covenant, that they are complementary and inseparable. And if you'd remove one, it is mutilating the world order of Baha'u'llah. They are complementary. Okay, so that was pop quiz, as they say, right? So you cannot remove one. They are absolutely complementary. They build on each other. They are fit, lock and key. Okay, Riaz Jan, Befama, please.
The first two lines, divine in origin. The twin institutions are divine in origin.
Mm-hmm.
This issue or topic of them being divine in origin, I feel we should remind ourselves of this principle, or this characteristic, that both are divine in origin. I say this because in many presentations, when the Universal House of Justice is mentioned, the fact that it's divine in origin, I feel, is left out, unfortunately. And they simply say, this is the international governing body of the Baha'i faith.
Mm-hmm.
They make no attempt to point out its divine origin.
Very good point. Yeah, it becomes a bureaucracy, an organization, and it's a leadership of an organization, like a business even, or a company. And these are the leaders of a company. But this is not in that sense. These are, as Riaz Jan mentioned, this is a divine in origin. This institution has been foretold by His Holiness Baha'u'llah in Kitab Aqdas, and also other tablets from Baha'u'llah. He mentions this institution. So this is also the institution of the guardianship is foretold, and we're going to come to that, Riaz Jan. So these are very interesting points that is mentioned. Divine in origin, and also divinely protected institutions. So that's another point, divinely protected. So they're complementary in their aim and purpose. So it's not that, okay, the guardian did this, now the House of Justice is doing that, okay? No, if you look at what the Universal House of Justice is doing and has done, it is complementary. They have been, the Universal House of Justice has constantly, through research department, the Supreme Body constantly has been reviewing what the plans of the beloved guardian are and were, and then model and shape the plans of the Supreme Body after those plans. Yes, Riaz John, you have a hand, Befar, please. You're muted. Sorry, Riaz John.
Yes, sorry. All right. I just want to add that this issue, this principle or characteristic of divine House of Justice being divine in origin, this is not difficult to point out. It's very, very easily and explicitly ordained, let's use the word ordained, or created by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab al-Aqdas, very, very clearly, and can be seen very easily. There's no convoluted philosophical explanations for it. It's in black and white, explicit in the text of the Kitab al-Aqdas, and yet this aspect, or is, well, I would say it's essential origin or nature. This nature of being divine in order. This is, I've never seen anyone mention it, even in large presentations. They go as far as saying it's elected internationally,
right,
and all that, but never any mention, any even allusion that it's divine in origin and where it came from. It's and what is this actual, how did it come into being, and who created this? How was it? Was it by popular
vote?
popular polling? What? Because I say this because in general culture, in presentations, whenever, especially an institution of this magnitude, whenever such an institution is mentioned, they always give its origin, its authority, its stature, its scope of authority, as part of saying what this institution is. So I just want to make us aware, to be aware of this fact that, yes, all those things, yes, however, its creation is so unique in human history. And it's even, its creation is, I think, predicted in previous scriptures, religious scriptures. For example, and the government shall be on his shoulder. That's, I don't know, 3,000 years old, this prediction. That's my impression. And these are only my own personal observations.
I like those observations, Riaz John. Very good. So yeah, we're going to be coming to some of those other, I don't know if it's going to, I don't think it's in this part, but it might be in a future part on the guardianship and those other relations to this, different dispensations. So moving on, dear friends. Okay, let's get into more study. Without this institution of the Universal House of Justice, the world order of Baha'u'llah loses its ability to fill the legislative gaps intentionally left in the Kitab al-Aqdas. So it's a legislative body that is filling these gaps that have been left in the Kitab al-Aqdas. The beloved guardian is the authoritative interpreter of the word of God. And the Supreme Body, the Universal House of Justice, has the function of legislating on matters not explicitly revealed in the teachings. So this is one of their primary functions. And when I say this is one of their primary functions, is to legislate on matters not explicitly revealed in the teachings. So if you ever email the Universal House of Justice and ask them a question, the very first thing they do is they check to see if that question is in the revealed teachings. And if it's there, they immediately cite it. And they say, this is from the source, and here it is. They even may make a compilation on that and send it to you on that specific question. And so, but if it is not explicitly revealed in the teachings, then it's up to the supreme body on how they will either legislate on that at that current time or in the future. So it's up to the supreme body. Another beautiful thing is the Universal House of Justice is not bound by its past decisions. They are free to change any decision they have made in the past. So that is another freedom that the Universal House of Justice has. Okay, so paragraph 102. Moving on, dear friends. In paragraph 102, the beloved guardian refers to these twin institutions of the guardianship and the Universal House of Justice as the two fundamental organs of the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha and the twin pillars of the Bahá'í administrative structure. The Bahá'í administrative order is dependent on these two institutions of the guardianship and the Universal House of Justice. So the guardianship and the Universal House of Justice, these twin institutions, it is paragraph 103. The beloved guardian is highlighting the common functions and distinctive authorities of each of these twin institutions. These institutions should be regarded divine in origin. Riaz Jan was emphasizing, right? Divine in origin, essential in their functions, and complementary in their aim and purpose. Okay, these are the three common fundamental objectives. This is what the common objectives. They are to ensure the continuity of that divinely appointed authority which flows from the source of our faith. What would that be called if in a single word? To ensure the continuity of that divinely appointed authority which flows from the source of our faith. It is begins with a C, book 8. Ruhi book 8 is on the covenant, right? So this is to ensure the continuity of that divinely appointed authority which flows from the source of our faith. To safeguard the unity of its followers, protection of the covenant, right? Safeguard the unity of its followers, and to maintain the integrity and flexibility of its teachings. I think that's a beautiful thing too. Flexibility of its teachings. Wow. That's another thing in the faith we should be very well aware of rigidity. If we're suddenly becoming rigid, and so if there's any aspects of rigidity, we should always turn to the guidance and even always inquire from our supreme body is if there's any forms of rigidity. That's it. Because rigidity is actually stymies spiritual progress, actually. I've read that. It's the aspects of flexibility and creativity is very, that level of, so this is, the Universal House of Justice is talking about maintaining integrity as well as flexibility of its teachings. Very good. Now, continuing on the theme of paragraph 103, in order to achieve their common objectives, the two institutions work together for the cause to, what do? This is how they work together. They work to administer its affairs. okay? Coordinate its affairs, promote its interests, execute its laws, and defend its subsidiary institutions. So this is during the period of the guardianship and the functions of the Universal House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice administers its affairs, coordinates its affairs, it promotes its interests, it executes its laws, and defends its subsidiary institutions. Can anyone name any subsidiary institutions?
National Spiritual Assembly.
Excellent, Ms. Yuda. Absolutely. The National Spiritual Assemblies, the local spiritual assemblies, right? So these are subsidiary institutions defending the subsidiary institutions. And examples of defending these institutions are when they're under persecution, and so to defend them, these are examples. All right, moving on. Now, this is a very important point that the beloved guardian has stressed now in a few paragraphs, is the aspect of the complementary functions, roles of these bodies, the twin pillars of the Baha'i administrative order, the guardianship and the Universal House of Justice. So again, the beloved guardian here is stressing their complementary roles. They operate in their well-defined areas of jurisdiction based on the instruments designed for their effective function. And within the limits imposed upon them, each exercises its authority, its rights, and prerogatives. These are supplementary to each other. And at the end of paragraph 103, the beloved guardian, Shoaib Effendi, emphasizes, far from being incompatible or mutually destructive, these two institutions supplement each other. They supplement each other's authority and functions and are permanently and fundamentally united in their aims. So they're complementary as well as they supplement each other. So the beloved guardian, infallible. He is that aspect of being an infallible interpreter of the creative word, right? He is an interpreter, divine interpreter. Universal House of Justice, infallible legislative body that also legislates on everything else that has not been revealed in the teachings. So they per se fill in what has not been revealed in the teachings. So they legislate on that. So that is how they are complementary and supplementary in that aspect. His Holiness Abdul Baha states in his will and testament that the sacred and youthful branch, the guardian of the cause of God, as well as the Universal House of Justice, to be universally elected and established, are both under the care and protection of the Abha beauty, under the shelter and unerring guidance of the Exalted One. May my life be offered up for them both. Whatsoever they decide is of God. I repeat, they are both under the care and protection of the Abha beauty, under the shelter and unerring guidance of the Exalted One. Whatsoever they decide is of God. Infallible, right? They are under the care and protection of God. So if the decision of the Universal House of Justice is something that you may not like, or you may not think it's the best decision or whatever, right? Tough. Tough. It's of God. That is an infallible decision from God, right? It is something that might be a test on you, but the reality is that is a decision that is what? It is an infallible decision, and the Universal House of Justice is under the care and protection of Baha'u'llah. It is under the care and protection of Baha'u'llah. And And whatever they decide is from God. Real John, you have a hand. Beframe, please.
I have a question.
Excellent.
This designation, the exalted one, is this a reference to the Bab? Maybe I'm just asking. Because in other writings, the Bab is often referred to as the exalted one.
It's a good question. Under the exalted one, I have to double reference that because I look up the titles because, you know, in all truth and honesty, Rios John, sometimes these titles might not be the exact appellation because of translators. But I have to look up at, you know, this specific and see who cross-reference it to other sources and see if that is in reference to who exactly. But that's a good question.
All right.
Sanjay, can I say something?
Absolutely. Farzad John, Bifar.
Okay, Riaz John, were you gonna? I can go after him. Riaz, were you gonna say something?
No, because I asked this question because if it's the Bab, then it's a whole new ball game because we have the I'll wait for Farzad, but we have the shrine of the Bab as the central ornament at the world center, of the faith,
Sure.
right there in the heart of Mount Carmel. But let's see what Fuad has to say.
Farzad John, Bifar.
No, what I was gonna say, I think I agree with Riaz John that it's the exalted one here is the blessed Bab, because if you go back one line up, it says protection of the Abha beauty, that's Baha'u'llah, right? Under the shelter and unerring guidance of the exalted Bab, one which I think is the Bab. Parentheses, it says, may my life be offered up for them both.
Oh, them, them
both. So it's not one, it's not one. It's two.
I didn't notice the word them. Yes.
Yeah, them both.
Yes.
I think them both means there's
Baha'u'llah
and the Bab.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, well, that's an excellent point, Farzad, because it's because of the implications that the Bab is not simply the forerunner and his mission is completed and and we can is kind of out of the picture, so to speak. So, but here Abdul Baha says no, under the unerring guidance of the exalted one. So the Bab, I mean, if it is the Bab, then he is very much a player in this whole new divine revelation, in the Baha'i revelation. He is a active influence, active partner, active element in the entirety of the administration, the world order, the whole new divine revelation.
Excellent. Thank you, Riaz John. Thank you so much. All right. Moving on. The institution of the guardianship was established in the Will and Testament of Abdul Baha as a hereditary office. Abdul Baha appointed the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi, his grandson, as the guardian of the Baha'i faith. And in paragraph 104, Shoghi Effendi highlights the significance of the institution of the guardianship, without which the world order of Baha'u'llah will be deprived of the hereditary principle which has been invariably upheld by the law of God. The integrity of the faith would be imperiled, and the stability of the entire fabric would be gravely endangered. So if you do not have the guardianship, the integrity of the entire faith would be imperiled. If you do not have the guardianship, the stability of the entire fabric would be gravely endangered. That's something, dear friends, I encourage you, to refresh yourselves on the ministry of the guardian. What did he do? How important was and is the beloved guardian in the history of our faith? What did he do? It's incredible. The beloved guardian, he was not just a authoritative interpreter. He was not just a master architect of the shrines and the Baha'i World Center. He has a place in the entire Baha'i administrative order that is an incredible function as the guardianship and as a pillar, twin pillar to the Universal House of Justice, is the guardianship. And honestly, I absolutely believe the moment he learned that he was the guardian, he understood what the guardianship was, and that's what shook him to the core. He understood the overwhelming weight and responsibility that was now thrust upon his shoulders. And he was so overwhelmed when that happened. And so I encourage you also to refresh yourselves on The Priceless Pearl by Ray Khanum. What happened during that period? It's very interesting. And if you don't have The Priceless Pearl, I'm not going to say go get one. It's online. So, so you can Google it, but also get one. It's an incredible book. So you can have your own copy and read it cover to cover. So you get to connect to the beloved guardian. You connect to the words of Amatul Baha Ray Khanum, her personality, her devotion, her faith. And you get to see also the awesomeness of this individual. Remember, this is another thing I want you to remember. The beloved guardian was not perfect, okay? He was pretty close, but he would be the first one to say, I am not perfect, okay? He would be the first to say, I am not perfect. The beloved guardian, he was not, in that sense, the perfect exemplar, okay? And that is Abdul Baha. The beloved guardian, his life is also an incredible life, and also encourage you to look to him as an exemplary life of how, as individuals, our characters we should work on, because he was so profoundly tested. And he was just a human like any one of us. Think of, that's why I encourage you to study our history. And I always use the word our history, our. If you claim to be a Baha'i, this is your history. So you need to know it, not just, I kind of know a few events in this thing. How well do you know your history, the events, the time periods, the dates? It's your history, it's your family. So learn it well enough that you can share it, right? So the episodes that he had to deal with, the tests on his fragile character, he became a mountain. And at times he was so tested that he had to leave. And Bahá'í Khanum took the reins of the faith twice, not once, twice. The beloved guardian is something I encourage you to learn, as well as Bahá'í Khanum. What a champion she was too. So I encourage you to study these individuals, what they had to go through, and so you become closer to your own history as a Baha'i. Now, this is a very interesting, I found this in Lights of Irfan. Okay, so Irfan is is a study that they do in the Baha'i schools. They actually publish essays and talks on myriad different subjects. By Baha'i scholars do it. The Lights of Irfan series is in English. There's also one in Persian. Okay, and so this was the 6th volume of Lights of Irfan, and this was a talk that was given by Ian Semple. This was a former Universal House of Justice member on the interpretation and the guardianship. So this is a portion of his talk. So this is some cursory observations might indicate that an uninterrupted view over a series of generations, as mentioned in paragraph 104, is due to the fact that the guardianship is hereditary. So Ian Semple suggests an alternative understanding of this point. So this is interesting. So I wanted to share this because this is coming from a member of the Universal House of Justice. This is what he says. In the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, Shoghi Effendi wrote that without such an institution as the guardianship, the means required to enable the faith to take a long and uninterrupted view over a series of generations would be completely lacking. I have heard friends relate this statement to the fact that the guardianship is a hereditary institution and that it was this hereditary factor that would provide the means to the faith to take this long view. I have not seen this point made in any of the Guardian's writings, however, and it seems to me that although, of course, there is an element of truth in the assumption, the mere fact that each guardian would have succeeded his father in office does not seem an adequate basis for the exercise of such an exclusive function. The function of inspired interpreter, however, does imply it. As interpreter, the guardian is able to understand not only the outward meaning of the writings, but their inner implications. Although others, by studying the writings and the progress of human affairs, can gain some idea of the way society will develop, the guardian alone could clearly see the whole panorama of Baha'u'llah's intention and could delineate for us the course that the manifestation of God sees as lying before us. This indeed Shoghi Effendi has done in his World Order letters and also in God Passes By. The latter is not only a history book, magnificent though it may be in that respect, it is also an inspired commentary on the events it recounts, illuminates the past, challenges us in the present, and gives us a vision of the future. So this aspect here that he's talking about is of hereditary. That the guardianship is just merely a hereditary institution. He's saying it's not just a merely hereditary institution here. You follow that? That this is from Ian Semple. That he's saying that the function of inspired interpreter, however, does imply that it will be uninterrupted view over a series of generations, that the guardianship will be forever under the guardianship. So moving to paragraph 106, the beloved guardian cites extracts from the following section of the Will and Testament of Abdul Baha on the institution of the guardianship. He states, after the passing away of this wronged one, it is incumbent upon the Aqsan, the branches, the Afnan, the twigs of the sacred lote tree, the hands, the pillars of the cause of God, and the loved ones of the Abha beauty, to turn unto Shoghi Effendi, the youthful branch branched from the two hallowed and sacred lote trees, and the fruit grown from the union of the two offshoots of the tree of holiness, as he is the sign of God, the chosen branch, the guardian of the cause of God, he unto whom all the ahsan, the afnan, the hands of the cause of God, and his loved ones must turn. He is the expounder of the words of God, and after him will succeed the firstborn of his lineal descendants. So clear, right? You can unquestionably, it names him as the successor, right? So you cannot, this unquestionable, very clear. It says, after the passing of this wronged one. Who? Abdul-Baha, right? Because it's in his will and testament. So he says, after I pass away, it is incumbent upon Ahsan, family of Baha'u'llah, the Afnan, the family of the Blessed Bab, as well as the hands of the cause of God, the loved ones of Baha'u'llah, to turn to who? Shoghi Effendi. It says him right there, his name. Boom. You can, unquestionable. You can't be like, oh, to turn unto my favorite loved one. Then they're like, who? Which of my favorite loved ones? No, it actually says him by name. So there's no question. It says Shoghi Effendi in his will and testament, that the youthful branch from the two hallowed and sacred lote trees. So which trees are these? The family of the Blessed Bab and family of Baha'u'llah, right? As he is the sign of the God, the chosen branch, the guardian of the cause of God. And then it very clearly in this paragraph gives him one of his duties, right? He says what he is here. He is the expounder of the words of God. He has that, he is a sign of God. And then it states after him. Then it says after him what will happen. After him, who will succeed him? So it has to be firstborn of his lineal descendants. So it has to be from his family. So very clear. That we carry on. It says, O ye beloved of the Lord, it is incumbent upon the guardian of the cause of God to appoint in his own lifetime. So it has to be in his own lifetime. That shall become his successor, that differences may not arise after his passing. He that is appointed must manifest in himself detachment from all worldly things, must be the essence of purity, must show in himself the fear of God, knowledge, wisdom, and learning. Thus should the firstborn of the guardian of the cause of God not manifest in himself the truth of the words, the child is the secret essence of its sire. That is, should he not inherit of the spiritual within him, the guardian of the cause of God and his glorious lineage, not be matched with a goodly character, then must he, the guardian of the cause of God, choose another branch to succeed him. So if the first one, the first lineal descendant, doesn't have those qualities of, namely what? Essence of purity, right? Detachment, fear of God, knowledge, wisdom, and learning. If the first of his lineal descendant doesn't possess these qualities, then Abdul-Baha states that he then must choose another branch to succeed him. Okay? Riyaz Shah, please.
About the Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the cause of God, being descendant of the twin divine lote trees, it's from my understanding that it was the wife of Abdul-Baha, Munira Khanum, who is the connection to the Afnan, meaning the family of the Bab. It was she, Munira Khanum, who brings in brings in the notion of the twin divine lote trees. She is the connection with the family of the Bab, if I'm not mistaken.
Nope, you're not mistaken. You're absolutely taken, not mistaken. You're spot on that.
But there's it's a very curious way in which this happened. There's a new book called The Leaves of the Twin Divine Trees the leaves of the twin divine trees. It's on. It's already published and available on Amazon. Explores the lives of the women in the beginnings of the Baha'i revelation, and one of them is Munira Khanum, the wife of Abdul Baha. The curious thing is that she was initially going to marry someone else, and she in fact did wed. She did marry that person, but that person was not able to consummate that marriage, and soon thereafter he took his own life. And then Baha'u'lláh invited her to meet Abdul Baha, and then the rest is history. They became married, Abdul Baha and Munira Khanum. So she had this curious history in her life, and at the same time brings the family of the Bab as one of the ancestors of the guardian of the cause of God. Anyway, that's my recollection.
You have better recollection on the aspects of life of Munira Khanum than I do. You have a hand. I'm thinking it's Zamruhi Jan. بفرمایید Zamruhi Jan.
Well, it's Zamruhi and Farza.
There you go.
I'm not sure about what Riyaz Jan just said, and I want to, but I'm not sure. I always thought, and I have no way to substantiate this, but I always thought it's the lineage from the Bab was from Guardian's father, who was a Rabbani, and not Munira Khanum. I may be wrong.
I'm going to send to the class the whole lineage, okay? So we'll have that and we can study.
I always thought Guardian's, the Guardian's father was an Afnan, but I may be wrong.
I'll send it to the class. So we're not going to get into detailed study tonight on the lineage of that, but I'll send it to the class and then in a future.
I'm looking I'm looking something up. Studied. I would like to really know more about Munira Khanum.
Oh yeah.
I had read somewhere. I know it was a substantial knowledge information. Munira Khanum, either her father's side of the background was even Indian, from India.
That's what I've read also. Yes, I think so.
And
I think she was related to the beloved of the martyrs. I think she's related to those
honestly,
from Isfahan.
Originally from Isfahan, right?
Yeah.
Her family was originally one of the Babis of Isfahan, who later became Baha'is of Persia.
Okay, we'll kind of.
I will send that to the class. Munira Khanum, as well as the family, how it links to the beloved guardian. Okay, that's very interesting. Great questions. I love it. See, questions help us learn stuff, but it has to be good questions. You know, here's a funny anecdote. In the Baha'i months, we have 19 Baha'i months, right? And one of the months is questions, right? There's no month called answers. And so there was someone asked a question to a counselor, and this asked the counselor said, "Why is there a Baha'i month called questions?" And the counselor responded. He said, "Because you guys don't ask good questions. You got to work on asking good questions. And so when you ask good questions, the answer comes, So the reality is as we work and study and deepen and work to refine our questions, the light will come, And so that's something that working to, are we thinking of the correct question? That's something that we have to do. Okay.
If I may add quickly, it's very curious and interesting, because in this new revelation, we keep hearing about things don't happen by happenstance, and the hand of God is in everything. And this history of Munira Khanum is very interesting, because she first gets married to this groom. They actually get married, but the groom, upon marriage, the groom cannot speak. He's not able to speak to anyone. He's completely withdrawn. And he's not able to consummate the marriage either.
Poor guy.
So soon thereafter, he takes his own life.
Right.
And so this is very interesting, very curious. And then she becomes available to come to the Holy Family and marry Abdul Baha. So it seems that the hand of God was in operation.
Abdul Baha said, "That's my lady," so that's what happened, right? And
this is in the book, the new book, Leaves of the Twin Divine Trees. It's on Amazon.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely. I encourage you to read up on that history. Yeah, absolutely amazing. The history of Munira Khanum and the ladies of the cause. This is another thing, just a 2-second anecdote. The ladies of our cause have all been incredible. Nawab, Munira Khanum, Bahá'í Khanum, incredible. They are all exemplary in their own right, and so I encourage you to, read up on who these ladies and what they had to undergo in their own sufferings in the faith. So that's something, cool book. Absolutely, Riaz John. Thank you for the recommendation for the class to pick that up. I've actually seen it in my mama's house. I'm absolutely sure she's read that book. Moving on, dear friends, let us go to the next one. The hands of the cause of God must elect from their own number 9 persons that shall at all times be occupied in the important services in the work of the guardian of the cause of God. The election of these 9 must be carried either unanimously or by majority from the company of the hands of the cause of God, and these, whether unanimously or by a majority vote, must give their assent to the choice of the one whom the guardian of the cause of God hath chosen as his successor. This assent must be given in such wise as the assenting and dissenting voices may not be distinguished. Secret ballot, right? So this is such an incredible thing too, this paragraph here. The hands of the cause of God is the branch of the learned. It's an appointed institution, right? So it's a branch of the learned. Now, within the branch of the learned is now an elected portion. So it's kind of like the rulers within the branch of the learned, because they're voting secretly ballot rulers within the branch of the learned. These is an elected from their own 9 persons. So it's like an institution within an institution. You get it? And this is what do we call this? These are the custodians of the cause of God, and they have their permanent seats in Haifa. So this is the custodians. Okay, so then lastly, the beloved guardian is an offshoot of the twin manifestations of God. An offshoot. The 2 statements, the hallowed and sacred low trees, the 2 offshoots of the tree of his holiness are references to Baha'u'llah and the blessed Bab. The beloved guardian was descended from Baha'u'llah through his mother, Ziya Khanum, the eldest daughter of Abdul Baha. He was also descendants from the Bab through who? Mirza Hadi Shirazi, who was the grandson of Haji Mirza Abul Qasim, a cousin of the mother of the Bab and a brother of the wife of the Bab. So this is how that line, and I'm going to send the lineage and everything. So this is actually right there in the presentation, but this is how, this is through his father. That's how it is. Okay. All right. Farzad John, you got the points. I give you the recognition on there. There you go. Abdul Baha established the institution of the guardianship based on the following principles. So these are the principles as stated in the Will and Testament. Shoghi Effendi is the interpreter of the word of God. The successor of the guardian is the firstborn of his lineal descendants. And the guardian should appoint his successor during his lifetime. And as mentioned, I didn't put it in one of these bullet points, but if the beloved guardian could not see anyone of his lineal, based on his lineal descendants having those qualities, he should appoint someone else of his lineal descendants. You follow? And if the first child does not manifest the required qualities, this is what I'm saying. If the first child does not manifest the required qualities, then the hands of the cause must elect 9 members among themselves to approve the one chosen by the guardian as his successor. So this is what are the principles stated. In paragraph 101, the beloved guardian states that Baha'u'lláh anticipated the institution of the guardianship in the Kitab Ahdas. Baha'u'lláh anticipated the guardianship in the Kitab Ahdas. Also, when summarizing the content of the Kitab Ahdas in God Passes By, Shoghi Effendi mentions that Baha'u'lláh anticipates by implication the institution of guardianship. It's also mentioned in God Passes By. So now the question comes to Riaz John. Where is it anticipated? So let's find out. So the question was sent to the Universal House of Justice. In a letter written on behalf of the Universal House of Justices, the instances of the implication referred to by Shoghi Effendi are clarified. So this is from the Supreme Body, this letter. Although there is no explicit reference to the guardianship in the Kitab Ahdas, the synopsis and codification lists anticipation of the institution of the guardianship on page 214 of God Passes By. When summarizing the contents of the Ahdas, Shoghi Effendi states that in it, Baha'u'lláh anticipates by implications the institution of guardianship, and again on page 147 of the World Order of Baha'u'lláh. The guardian refers to the verses of the Kitab Ahdas, the implications of which clearly anticipate the institution of the guardianship. Now, interesting, it says one such implication is the matter of Huququllah, the right of God, which is ordained in the Kitab Ahdas, without provision being made for who is to receive it. In his Will and Testament, Abdul Baha fills this gap by stating, it is to be offered through the guardian of the cause of God. Other implications of this institution can be seen in the terms in which Abdul Baha is appointed as the successor of Baha'u'lláh and the interpreter of his teachings. The faithful are enjoined to turn their faces towards the one whom God hath purposed, and who have branched from this ancient root, and are bidden to refer whatsoever they do not understand in the Baha'i writings to him who have branched from this mighty stock. Yet another can be seen in the provision of the Ahdas concerning the disposition of international endowments, a passage which not only refers this matter to the Akhsand, this is the male descendants of Baha'u'lláh, but also provides for what should happen should the line of Ahsan end before the coming into being of the Universal House of Justice. So this is a very clear paragraph that the Universal House of Justice is stating in reference to the implications of the guardianship mentioned in the Kitab Ahdas, or referenced by Baha'u'llah, and in what regards is he referenced in aspects of institutions. And you can see some of the institutions and implications he's mentioned in the institution of the Huququllah. He is referenced. He's also as referenced as the interpreter of his teachings. So these are some of the implications that the Universal House of Justice is stating here. Okay, let's get a reader. Zamrui, John, you would like to read this one for us?
Sure. The institution of the Universal House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice is the other crowning institution of the Baha'i Administrative Order. This is the supreme body of the Baha'i faith, established by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i Ahdas. As stated in paragraph 107, Baha'u'llah has endowed the Universal House of Justice with the power to legislate the laws and ordinances not stated by him. In Kalamat Ferdowsiyeh, Words of Paradise, Baha'u'llah sets out the functions of the House of Justice and promises that God will inspire them. It is incumbent upon the trustees of the House of Justice to take counsel together regarding those things which have not outwardly been revealed in the book, and to enforce that which is agreeable to them. God will verily inspire them with whatsoever he willeth, and he verily is the provider, the omniscient. In Ishraqat, Baha'u'llah expands further on the responsibilities of the members of the Universal House of Justice. It is incumbent upon the men of God's House of Justice to fix their gaze by day and by night upon that which hath shone forth from the pen of glory, for the training of peoples, the upbuilding of nations, the protection of man, and the safeguarding of his honor.
Beautifully read. Thank you. So now we're exploring the other twin pillar, namely the Universal House of Justice. And as mentioned, this is the other crowning institution of the Bahá'í Administrative Order. And this is also divine, right? It's stated very clearly. This is established by Baha'u'llah in the Kitab Ahdas. And it is, as mentioned, it has been elaborated and expounded more by Baha'u'llah in the Kalamat al-Ferdowsiyeh as well as the Ishraqat. And so this is where it states that this is incumbent upon the trustees of the House of Justice take counsel together. And what did he have to take counsel on? They have to take counsel regarding those things which have not outwardly been revealed in the book, and then to enforce that which is agreeable to them. As well, God will verily inspire them with whatsoever he willeth, and he verily is the provider, the omniscient. And then what they have to do as members of the House of Justice: fix their gaze by day and night. It's not an easy thing as a member of the House of Justice. Day and night, right? Upon that which shone forth from the pen of glory, for the training of peoples, upbuilding of nations, the protection of man, and the safeguarding of his honor. So this is the Riyaz. You have hand, Befran, please.
Thank you so much. This last duty, I think it has always impressed me. The safeguarding of the honor of mankind. The protection of man and the safeguarding of his honor. This is very unique. I feel unique in general, very unique. This is, and it has very deep implications because it recognizes the nature of the human being, the nature of humankind, the nature, meaning the deep nature, the essential nature of the human being. And here they should safeguard his honor.
Mhm.
This is very unique across culture in general and across all branches of organizations and such. This is very, I feel, as we don't pay much attention to this, but it is absolutely essential that it brings out the true nature and the true character of the human being. As of course we read in the writings that this human being is created in the image and likeness of God.
Right.
That's where this honor needs to be cultivated, nurtured, made to come to fruition and be protected here as a safeguarding this honor.
It's beautiful, beautifully said, Riaz John. Yeah, when you look at these majestic buildings, the Ark, it's very regal, it's very like royalty, very impressive. And when I think about what you're saying, Riaz John, protecting the honor, safeguarding the honor of humanity, the first thing that I thought of was you were speaking so eloquently, I was thinking of the hidden word, noble have I created thee. Why dost thou abase thyself? And then I correlated it to what is the most noble safeguard that we have now? It's the Supreme Universal House of Justice, the supreme body. And humanity have often been abasing itself. And now the Universal House of Justice is wanting to raise the nobility of humanity out of the wastes of nothingness, right? And it wants to safeguard and protect humanity. So this is under the protection of the Universal House of Justice. The House of Justice is like the loving shepherd trying to raise the humanity and protect it and bring it to its true worthiness and fulfill its capacity that it has. So you're absolutely spot on, Riaz John, on as observation on that. That's an incredible role and function and duty of the Universal House of Justice, to safeguard the honor of humanity. Because this is not just safeguard the honor of the Baha'is. This is all humanity. It's incredible.
I say this because the other functions are somewhat, I don't want to say mechanical, but somewhat procedural methods. For example, the other one, the training of peoples. So that's a method, a procedure, a process. The upbuilding of nations, same thing. It's a process. The protection of man, you could say, yeah, that's also a process, a method, an order. But this safeguarding the honor, this is not mechanical. This is very ethereal. It escapes the physical and the material. It has to do with the honor of man. That's way above the material world. That's in the spiritual realm. Yeah. That's my own understanding.
Very well said. Thank you, Riaz John. All right. His Holiness Abdul Baha provides a more explicit explanation on the functions of the Universal House of Justice in his Will and Testament, as cited by the beloved Guardian Shaykh Effendi in paragraph 107. Abdul Baha defines the responsibilities of the institution of the Universal House of Justice and highlights the legislative authority and infallibility of this institution. Abdu'l-Baha invests the Universal House of Justice with the additional power to abrogate those laws legislated by the Universal House of Justice. So, as mentioned, the Universal House of Justice can abrogate its own laws that it has legislated itself. Since the beginning of his ministry, Shoaib Effendi rigorously endeavored to develop the administrative structure required to support the Universal House of Justice. Every newly elected National Spiritual Assembly was another pillar in the foundation on which the future Universal House of Justice was to be erected. He assured Baha'is that God's supreme House of Justice shall be erected and firmly established in the days to come. When this most great edifice shall be reared on such an immovable foundation, God's purpose, wisdom, universal truths, mysteries, and realities of the kingdom, which the mystic revelation of Baha'u'llah has deposited within the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha, shall gradually be revealed and made manifest. Yeah, every one of these columns, these pillars, is like a National Spiritual Assembly that had to come into being for the Universal House of Justice to become elected. And so this was the real challenge that the beloved Guardian took on, and to bring about all these National Spiritual Assemblies to come into creation, so that the Universal House of Justice could be eventually elected in 1963. So the beloved Guardian has referred to the Universal House of Justice as that supreme legislative body of the future Baha'i Commonwealth, and the exponent and guardian of that divine justice, which can alone ensure the security of and establish the reign of law and order in a strangely disordered world. The future generations will regard the Universal House of Justice as the last refuge of a tottering civilization. It's so easy to turn on the news. In fact, I watch less and less news on TV because it's becoming increasingly depressing. I read my news, so I get it a bit more factual. But the news on TV is just so depressing. Every day, you could see how these institutions are just crumbling, and they have no idea where to turn, what to do, and what solution to take on these challenges. And the reality is, the world is facing so many different wars. The only wars that you might know about is the one that's happening in Ukraine with Russia. But there are so many other wars that you may not be aware of. And the one is happening in Ethiopia. It's an incredible war. That's so many displacement of population. But it's not popular news because it's a war in Africa, comparatively, So the realities is that what is happening with China and Taiwan, that one could turn into another massive conflict. These are crises. What is happening with North Korea? Yeah. Just launching missiles that could turn into another catastrophe the world has not seen. The reality is these crises are happening all over the world. One misstep, one missile hitting, for example, North Korea is launching missiles into the ocean. What happens if just one of them just goes a little bit further, hits mainland South Korea? God forbid. Yeah, the whole thing would start over again. Korean War. Tens and hundreds of thousands of loss of life. Now we have the capability of nuclear, God forbid. And with our president threatening these things, this is a tottering civilization that has mentioned in the writings. These things are crumbling. They don't know what to do, what path to turn, what solution. No, that's why the Universal House of Justice, the prescription, infallible, divine, ordained. This is eventually where humanity will turn for guidance, the last refuge. It's very interesting. So this is, I encourage you to, there's the Promise of World Peace is an incredible document. I encourage you to read the Promise of World Peace document, and how the Universal House of Justice addresses the world, and in a sense, in that document, and states very clearly that the world is very fast going down to the depths of war, poverty, all the problems that is brought upon itself, and that the only solution that we can do as a humanity to prevent mass death and casualties is come together as a population. I mean, so it's an incredible document, and I encourage you, if you have gatherings with your friends, your circles, it's a great document to study together, is the Promise of World Peace, because it's a document that presents the Baha'i solution to the ailing problems of the world. And it's a great document to study with your friends. And if you're like, oh, that's kind of long document. Here's an example. What did Abdu'l-Baha more often than not speak to everyone when he came to America? He spoke on peace, right? So as Baha'is, we should speak on peace. I mean, the world needs peace desperately. We should be lovers of peace and exponents of talking about peace. So the election of the Universal House of Justice happens in how many years? 3?
5.
5, right?
5.
Every 5 years, okay? So in addition to expanding on the functions and authorities of the Universal House of Justice in his will and testament, Abdu'l-Baha defines how this institution should be elected. The Universal House of Justice must be elected by universal suffrage, that is, by the believers in all countries. The secondary House of Justice, currently known as a
National Spiritual Assembly.
Absolutely, National Spiritual Assembly, must be instituted, and these secondary houses of justice must elect the members of the universal one. In connection with these words of Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi explains, these words clearly indicate a 3-stage election has been provided by Abdu'l-Baha for the formation of the International House of Justice. This implies that the members of the National Spiritual Assemblies will have to be indirectly elected by the body of believers in their respective provinces. And we just had the election of our delegates. So, and the delegates, wherever you reside as a Baha'i, in the members of that area, they vote for a delegate. And that delegate then goes to the National Convention, and the delegates vote for the National Spiritual Assembly. So, moving to the election of the Universal House of Justice, we're just 2 minutes before we close for tonight. Always trying to keep punctual. So, the beloved guardian summarizes the procedure for the election of the Universal House of Justice. The believers in every country will elect a certain number of delegates, who in turn will elect their national representatives, the secondary House of Justice, and whose sacred obligation and privilege will be to elect in time God's Universal House of Justice. And one of the beautiful things about the election of the Universal House of Justice is the Universal House of Justice it has invited that the members of all these national spiritual assemblies wear the costumes and attire from whichever country that they're hailing from. And so it's such a beautiful election, seeing the richness and diversity of the costumes and attire worn by the people from all around the world. And you can see the diversity of the Baha'i community. It's very beautiful to see. Okay, so this is, I have a few slides which are incredible, and then we'll finish this up. So Abdul-Baha considered electing the first members of the Universal House of Justice when his life was in danger under the Turkish regime. Okay, so even when very early on during Abdul-Baha's lifetime, he thought of electing the first members of the House of Justice when his life was in danger under the Turkish regime. And at that time, those opposing him were threatening to deport him to North Africa, to kill him. His life was in extreme danger. They wanted to deport him to North Africa to kill Abdul-Baha. He instructed Haji Mirza Taghi Afnan, the cousin of the Bab, to arrange for the election of the Universal House of Justice if the threats were executed. However, Abdul-Baha was not deported, and the election of the Universal House of Justice did not proceed at that time. So what happened? This is what happened. This lady, also known as Sitare Khanum, Lady Blomfield, she saved the life of Abdul-Baha. And this is the exact episode. And what happened? In the spring of 1918, she received a deeply disturbing telephone message from an authoritative source. This is what it stated: Abdul-Baha in serious danger. Take immediate action. Without delay, she went to Lord Lamington, a distinguished Scottish peer who admired Abdul-Baha. She told him what she had just learned. He promptly wrote a letter to the Foreign Office stressing the noble services that Abdul-Baha was performing, not only for the people of Palestine, but for all of humanity. He delivered this letter to Lord Balfour, the Foreign Secretary. Lord Balfour quickly sent a cablegram to General Allenby. This is General Allenby right here, right? Which said, extend every protection and consideration to Abdul-Baha, his family, and his friends when the British march on Haifa. As soon as General Allenby had taken Haifa, several days before he was expected to do so, he wired London, have today taken Palestine, notify the world that Abdul-Baha is safe. Lady Blomfield learned afterwards that her old friend Major Wellesley Tudor-Pole had sent the terrifying message which she received by telephone. Upon learning that the Turkish High Command threatened to crucify Abdul-Baha on Mount Carmel if the Turkish army should have to evacuate Haifa, Major Tudor-Pole made every effort to ensure his safety. Although the influential men to whom he first appealed for help knew nothing about Abdul-Baha and saw no urgent reason to assist him, the major finally found one officer with important connections who showed some interest in the matter. With his help, the major was able to send a message to the British foreign press. So you can see this is a point in time where the life of Abdul-Baha was severely threatened. And as mentioned, he had actually put in place, if his life was threatened, he had instructed Haji Mirza Taghi Afnan, the cousin of the Bab, to arrange for the election of the Universal House of Justice. But that did not take place. And it was through the works of Lady Blomfield, General Allenby, they worked to order to protect the life of Abdul-Baha. And this is the actual telegram. It says right here, just received cable from London saying official cable received. There states master well and protected, notify friends. Apal greetings. Isn't that cool? So I found the cable that states that Abdul Baha protected, this is in Star of the West. So there you go, dear friends. We'll close it off for tonight. But that was an episode in the history of our cause where the Universal House of Justice could have come into being at that point if the life of Abdul Baha was taken at that point, if he was crucified like those authorities wanted. And Abdul Baha had actually made the preparations and provisions, but it was not meant to be. Anyway, thoughts, questions? Or before we close it off for tonight?
Ryla's not here tonight.
Oh, Miss Luann, you
I
have...
have a question, but you don't have to answer it tonight.
Uh-huh.
But when you were talking about the Constitution and it was the building of nations, how are they going to do that? And have you heard of any, like I've heard that the House has helped write some constitutions?
It's a good question. The Universal House of Justice has written their own constitution, first of all. Okay, so it's the Constitution of the Universal House of Justice, and you can look that up. It's a fantastic document. Many governments actually come to the Universal House of Justice for advice on myriad different subjects. But as far as constitutions and how governments and all of these function and operate, this is something that will be coming in time, and we'll be learning about this. There is a fantastic document written by Mr. Nakhjavani. I'll send it to the class, okay? This is a series of his talks, and it was called Towards a New World Order. And it's a series of his talks on the twin pillars, the guardianship and the Universal House of Justice, okay? And he was giving these talks, and many of the friends were asking about the future. What is going to happen? Like you yourself, what is going to happen in the future with the Universal House of Justice and the future governments, and how is the Universal House of Justice going to play a part in this? They asked Mr. Nakhjavani, God bless his soul, all these difficult questions. And so in his talks, these questions are outlined, and his answers to it. It's fantastic. So I'll send that to the class. You can find it online. And for all the friends that I don't get to send it, you can find it. It's talks by Mr. Nakhjavani. Okay, so I'll send that to the class. So for your edification. Any other thoughts on anything? Yeah, it's this is a topic that is so rich and incredible. And I love at this point in the study how the beloved guardian is talking about these twin institutions together, complementary and supplementary. And we're coming up into the next part, and we're going to be really getting into the Universal House of Justice and getting a much greater appreciation of the role, function, and duties of the Supreme Body. So that will be forthcoming. All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, well, our closing prayer is going to be by my dear auntie, I believe, Auntie Nafesh. So thank you so much to every one of you, and wishing you all a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you so much.
ربنا وفقنا على معرفة أمرك العظيم وتخلق بخلقك الكريم و سلوک فی منهجک القویم بفضلک القدیم و جودک العمیم انک انت العلیم انک انت الرحمن الرحیم. بنده آستانش شوقی.
Thank you very much, Auntie. Thank you very much, every one of you. Have a
Good night.
wonderful night and a wonderful week. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
You too.
Ehsan Jan. Thank you. I love you, Aziz.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Love you guys. Thank you.